And so, have any of you been tempted just within the last couple days to give in to the temptation of what you gave up? Okay, so be honest. That's good. Sometimes it's easy within the first couple days to stick to what you've pledged to do before God, and that's great. So God, through the Spirit, intends to test Jesus and allowed him to be tested, just like God tested Abraham. God tested his only son, because we know the story of Abraham and Isaac, right? That Abraham had prayed to have a son because in his culture, if you didn't have children, you were considered to not be right with God. You were shunned in some ways or laughed at, that you had some problem. And so he had prayed. And he had prayed and prayed all of his life. And then he's 75 when the Lord shows up and tells him, you will receive a son and you will be blessed. And many, many, many generations will be blessed because of this son. And that would be the beginning of that family tree that would be extended from Abraham on throughout the generations, through the centuries. And then he had the child with his wife, who was also old, when he was 100 years old. So there he is. He has a son at 100 years old. I don't know about you, but I don't know that I could take care of a son or a daughter at the age of 100, let alone in my 50s. And there he was, but he was blessed, and his wife was blessed, and they raised the child, and the child lived about 25 years, maybe 30 years, when God said, come to me. He could have also been a teenager. Not really sure. But we know that he was older in age, and that God showed up and tested Abraham and said, go and sacrifice your only son. And that journey up the mountain to do what God asked him to do must have been excruciating, psychologically draining, that his faith was tested. He was probably questioning why the Lord would do this. But in this time, many, many centuries ago, that it was normal for the gods to demand human blood sacrifices. And so it wasn't out of the ordinary that a god would ask this of a person. And so there's Abraham. He's on top of the mountain. He puts his son on the wood. And then symbolically, we believe that Isaac was carrying the wood on his back that he would be laid out on. He thought it was for the sheep that they were hopefully going to receive by God on the mountain. So symbolically, he was carrying the wood, which is symbolic of the cross. And yet, when Abraham placed him on the altar with the wood, God stopped him and said, don't do it. So he passed the test. And that this becomes the polemic against human sacrifices. That our God does not require human blood sacrifices. That he's a loving God. And that the other gods were probably false spirits, demons, who were asking for this. That they always prey on the innocent, the children. It's terrible. Greatest evil there is. And so we also know that the Israelites were tested for 40 days and 40 nights when they had left Egypt and they were in the wilderness, in the desert. And that they did not pass those tests, and they spent 40 years in the desert until a whole generation had passed away.